Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Jonah and the Pod. Today, we have two very special guests. Actually, one co-host, one very special guest. The reason I say that is this is your fifth podcast, I think.
Yes, it is.
That's almost 10% of...
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that. That's insane.
But
hey, God said give 10%.
That's right. It's not quite 10% yet, so we'll get there.
I'll get there.
This is your fifth episode, which is crazy.
That's good.
And so everyone, you know Marcus, you don't need to.
You know me.
And this is, I guess, now my friend, but also Marcus's friend, Jacob.
Hello.
Best friend.
Best friend, yeah. And if you haven't seen him or heard him, we had an episode together about forgiveness. And in that episode, we talk about... was it in the episode or was it after the episode?
I think we discussed it after the episode, like future
my bad.
planned podcasts.
There's been too many episodes, bro. I can't keep up. Maybe Jacob, if you want to give a slight introduction about you, just so if they have missed the episode, then...
Yeah, hello. I am Mark's friend. No, my name's Jacob, and I guess relevant to today's podcast is that I am Mark's friend. We're very close friends. We've been friends from church. We've known each other for over a decade now, and we recently cemented that friendship by going to the US for a month. So that's something you only do with people you're close friends with, because it's a lot of time together, lots of time for everything, seeing good and bad, I thought that was a little bit of fun.
Yeah. So if you haven't noticed, our conversation is going to be about friendships. And this is what we discussed last time. It's like Marcus and Jacob have been friends for...
It's a long time.
It's hard to remember.
Put it this way. Jacob has been the height he has been since when?
Yes, year 6.
Okay, so I used to know Jacob when he was smaller than me. That's why I stress that. But it's been a long, long time. Like, what, 15...
Yeah, it's hard.
I'm
thinking that when I came back from New Zealand was maybe 2014. Like, I don't know if we were doing things around then. That was maybe 10 years. But that would have been 10 years like serving together. Like, we were running games and stuff at youth group. We've known each other for much longer.
Yeah.
I'm 25, so you could possibly know me for my whole life. It could happen.
I don't think I was there at birth.
That's a whole other thing.
But yeah,
that's called parenting. that's a different podcast.
It's definitely not a definitive amount of time, but we have known each other a really long time. And like Jacob said, it really, really became a lot more fruitful when we started serving together, which has been probably the better part of 10 years plus.
Yeah, that's cool. So I think we'll talk about, I guess, what it looks like biblically, but also from experience, what makes a good friendship. Because if... Like, I don't know your friendship too well, but it seems like you guys have a good friendship. I'm sure there's been ups and downs and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we can get into that. Obviously, you guys don't have to expose yourselves, but let's do it. Firstly, I know you did it a little bit already, but would you guys just maybe, like, I don't know how you would introduce your friendship.
Yeah. How did we meet?
How did you meet? Like, how did you...
So I feel like the important context for this is there is an age gap between Mark and I. It's about 10 years. And so...
10 or 11?
Yeah, it depends on... 11, I guess, based on a year of birth. And so that does mean that when I was in, like, Sunday school, like, Mark was almost an adult. So there was that age gap. But Mark did always like playing with the kids. There was always a connection there.
I still am.
It's still true. So I think we may have been hanging out from, even a very long ago, a very young age. He saw, I think, a lot from me at that age. You're a kid, you're immature in many ways. It probably would have been when I was in youth group and there for a couple of years that we were able to maybe like properly do things together. So that's probably when that started. But yeah, we'd known each other for a while. We'd played games and things for ages. And it's one of those things that you end up with a lot of similar hobbies. We both play games, so I think that would have come up a lot. Both very happy to play around with either the kids or with older people and, play ping pong or different things like that. So there was probably stuff that started it, I think, before the service. And then the thing that, like we mentioned, cemented it is probably when we first were asked to lead like a games night at camps together. It was something that other people had been doing. I think Mark had maybe been doing it a bit by himself first. But I was around and we're like, hey, why don't you two do it? And we're like, yeah, sure, we'll give that a go. And I don't know if it happened from day one, but that very quickly evolved into being at each other's houses, doing all the planning, occasionally doing some work, getting distracted by games. Like there's a lot that happens.
We say each other's houses, but Jacob's house has effectively become my second home. The amount of food I've had at Jacob, wow, like that's what's caused all the weight gain. That's what I'm blaming that on. Yeah, but I think one of the things I've always noticed about Jacob, like even now, so I'm 36, he's 25. There's actually a month between you guys, by the way.
Oh, there you go.
So, I thought you guys would be good friends. But I've always noticed that Jacob has been a very forward thinker and also a very mature person. So even now, like he's 25, I'm 36. He thinks in a really advanced kind of a way for his age. Which is not a bad thing. That's actually a great thing. And I think with his personality as well, is that he likes challenging things. He doesn't want to just accept the status quo, which, as we've discussed before, can be sometimes frustrating because I'm like, I just set a point, just accept it and be done with it. But no, let's challenge that. But that's a good thing, and we'll get to that kind of later. But I think that's really good, and it's something that I've actually appreciated a lot lately. And he's had that for like a long, anyone that knows Jacob knows that he's very mature, a very good thinker, and now when he serves at church and people want to get his point of view, that it makes sense why they want that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so it seems like, I think seems like you guys have, I don't know, been through like the ringer, if that makes sense. Like you've you guys don't know how long it's been, have you? You didn't really.
We'll say roughly 2013, 2014. Yeah, so okay. About 10 years 10 or so. Okay. Plus, yeah.
So I'll ask you what have been like I think the easiest thing is what has been the struggles, I guess, in friendships. And maybe it's not your own, like as in you two, but maybe just in general, maybe with other people. What have been like the biggest struggles, maybe personally or whatever?
Well, it's interesting because growing up, like I mentioned to you in my testimony, I was a very introverted person because I got bullied a lot. And I used to think, well, if this person bullies or these group of people bully me, then everyone's going to bully me. So I just stuck to myself. But then when I was, by the hand of God, made well, I then started to explore my extroverted side. So now I guess you could say I have a good balance of being both introverted and extroverted. Having said that, though, I've pursued, obviously, other friendships and other relationships and things like that. But I've often found, and Jacob can attest to this, is that I'm usually the one that's trying to put the effort in the relationship with other people. So I'm like, hey, let's hang out, let's do this, let's do that. But very rarely, apart from Jacob and maybe a handful of other people, would they be like, hey, Mark, do you want to do this? But when it does happen, I'm like, yes, of course, I'm free. Let's do it. One of the benefits of being single, by the way. But yeah, like I usually found that I'm the one putting in that effort. And so for me personally, that was a struggle because I'm like, I want people to invite me to things and, gel with them and have, like, obviously I love my own time because I have that balance of introverted versus extroverted. Yeah. But at the same time, I also want to be included in things, invited to things. And yeah, like that means a lot more to me than just your average person because of my previous experiences. But apart from that, I wouldn't say I've had massive challenges with friendships before. I mean, I've had times in my life where I've been really, really close to people, but then life has taken us different paths. And so that friendship just doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, like I haven't had any major issues with friendships like that before. Like I think there was a sermon that I was listening to, I think it used to happen at our previous church, where he was talking about Paul's missionaries journeys. And there were some people that were with Paul throughout the entire missionary journey. But then there were some people who were for part of his missionary journey, but that God had another purpose for that particular person to like plant a church or to become the elder of a church or what have you, that then forced them to split ways with Paul. And that wouldn't have been easy because they may have wanted to stay with Paul, but for the glory of God, they had to, serve somewhere else. So it kind of gives the notion that there will be people that come in and out of your life. That doesn't mean that they don't like you or something happened, but it's just that God wanted something different between, you and them, and his plans would have worked out better for you in that way had you split paths. So, and there's a lot of friendships that I can think of in various churches actually, where I've had that, and I don't regret any one of them at all. Like I'm really glad for the people that I had at those different points in time. Yeah.
I feel like applying what you're saying to us is probably for the best that Mark does lots of reaching out to people, because I'm very bad at reaching out to people in general. Like, obviously, we'll invite someone if there's an event or something happening, be like, oh yeah, we should get. But I'm much more likely to be on the receiving end of something like that. And I guess in things driving you apart, Mark and I say we're friends from church, but we've not been at the same church for about a year now. We've been in different places. And I think for some people, if I was no longer in the same place with them, it would mean like that friendship sort of dies or goes away, just because we've never been the best at trying to actively maintain it. But with Mark, I think it's never been never been a worry really. I think we're always pretty happy to do things. We'll still do things regularly. We like have regular Bible study. We're still doing together. And hanging out and stuff like this. Still doing things together. So that I think is quite helpful in this way. And so I guess there's a complementary nature of friendship that's been quite helpful here. In terms of challenges, it's not big things, like nothing you can really can't overcome, but everyone has their little niggles of how things get done, and you learn them more, I think, being around them in different contexts. I don't know if you want to talk about chips.
No, we weren't.
Chips.
No.
Why do I feel like I know?
We mentioned this on the last episode.
Did we?
Well. Yeah, we did, because
Okay.
what was when we watched Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. So we're in this. So I hate when people eat really loudly. It just really bothers me. It really gets me going. So then we're in the cinema. We were watching the first 2 episodes of the Rings of Power, the new Lord of the Rings series. And Jacob has, like, you get free, like, we got the tickets for free, actually. Cinebuzz just emailed me and they're like, here you go. I'm like, oh, cool. And Jacob's a massive fan of Lord of the Rings. I'm like, he'll love this. Yeah. And he's getting through his popcorn like a absolute weapon. And I'm like, Jacob, please, just 5 minutes.
Yeah. Not even on the road trip. I learned to sort of eat chips looking away from Mark in my mouth without my teeth. That's ways you do it. But
I feel so bad though, because it's like, this is my eccentricity. Like, I shouldn't use that to be a burden on other people. But Jake, like, and again, this is probably going to get into another avenue of our conversation, but Jacob's very accommodating like that, and I can be open with him because of how close to him. And speaking of what he said before about how we haven't been at a church, together for more than a year. I remember having a conversation with Jacob when I told him, I'm leaving the other church. And he was like, I don't want our relationship to suffer because of that. And when he said that, it really, really struck me. And I was like, I am going to do my very best to make sure that we maintain this friendship, even if I'm bearing 100% of the load. I don't care. You mean that much to me. Yeah.
That's cool. I feel like you were saying something, Jacob, before.
I don't know, maybe chip related. But no, it's one of those things that I think, like, if you're not accommodating, if you don't understand, if you don't want to try to make the attempt to understand or help others, like, it can be a problem for a friendship if you see something as mutually incompatible or whatever. But being able to understand each other, I think, is a very helpful step towards that. And then acting appropriately. And, sometimes that includes loving teasing in the way that that they, like, maybe get slightly annoyed by. But also it means not doing that when it matters and when it's important and recognizing the boundaries for that kind of stuff as well.
I think the caveat to that, though, is a lot of people from probably both my previous church and my current church now know that my buttons get very easily pushed, and Jacob likes pushing buttons. So, but that's the dynamic that we have. He's like, oh, dish. I'm like, he's like, haha, you just went, you growled.
I don't know if this is actually true, but I remember reading somewhere, and this is about like relationships, as in like boyfriend, girlfriend stuff. Maybe it ties in with friendships as well. But I remember reading, like, if you have like that teasing nature with your partner, it's actually like your relationship's it's statistically going to be stronger than others. It's very interesting. I don't know if it's actually true, but I remember reading that somewhere. Can't remember where, so don't quote me on that.
Yeah, if I had to guess as to why, I would say that it probably because it indicates some level of comfort. Because you don't tease people that you're uncomfortable to be around, right? Like, that's not something that happens. And I think you need to get to that stage in whether it is like a romantic relationship or in a friendship for it to get to that level of depth. So I suspect that's why. Not going to say now you have to tease your partner to make sure that your relationship lasts.
We've just destroyed hundreds of marriages.
But I think if I had to guess, I would say that that's why. It's like that sign of closeness or that sign of comfort.
But even then, I think there's limits. I think we've spoken about this before on a previous episode, but it's like we never tease each other to the point where we feel like we're purposely hurting someone. It's kind of like a friendly teasing, as it were. Like, I'm teasing you because I know that this bugs you, but I'm not teasing you to hurt you, if that makes sense. Which is something I never really fully understood when I was younger. Like, teasing usually is associated with putting down someone.
Yeah.
But if there's that friendly banter, and it's like done in a joking sort of way, and Jacob's never crossed that boundary with me before, and I hope I've never done that with him. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, it's the oil that smoothens the whole machine. Yeah.
What an analogy! I've never heard that before. So
I think that's the saying. I may have butchered that, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
This is something you guys were saying, and I started thinking, like, we know that in relationships there are roles with men and women. There's roles, but something you guys were like maybe alluding to, it was like, it seemed like there were roles in friendships as well, and it's not gender related or anything, but like it's saying like, even though he was the one that asked you, like, or told you, like, I don't want the church split, whatever you want to call it, like, to affect our friendship, you were the one to also just start reaching out, which is very interesting, because he was the one to say, like, what do we do? Hey, Marcus, like, don't I got this sort of thing. So it made me think, like, maybe, do you guys think there are actually roles in friendships?
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't know if you've ever done one of those personality test things. So I was doing
I knew this was coming.
I was doing one, the 16 personalities one, and there is a question about, like, that, say, initiation of stuff. It's like, I am the one who tends to initiate things in my friend group. And I was doing it in front of Mark, and I told him I had to answer no to that question because of you, like, because you're the one who's much more likely to initiate the thing. But honestly, it's helpful. Like, if I'm the kind of person who is, likely to forget, then it's good to have somebody who has a much better memory. I think I'm generally not someone who shows my emotions as readily, and so it's nice to be around Mark, who does show his emotions a lot more readily. I think you do still have the same way you have, like, complementary things in a marriage, or like a relationship like that. I think friendships can be complementary. Like, I don't think they have to be. Like, I think a lot of times friendships can be, hey, we both really like this game or whatever, and we play it together because that's the thing we're bonding over. But if the friendship is just that, I think that's okay. Like, if you're just bonding over games, you're just part of video game soccer, whatever, at uni, like, that's okay. But you're not likely to go for a full depth of friendship. I think for the depth, it probably needs the breadth as well. And that breadth often is when you find differences in different areas and ways that you learn to work together, in ways that you do things a bit differently, and you sort of learn to accept that.
I think there's a very interesting dynamic with Christian friendships as well. I remember a sermon many, many years ago from a leader from our previous church was saying, like, if you know, like, someone you work with, that's literally the only thing you have in common between the two of you. Or if you went to school with someone, or if you were engaged in a sport or a hobby together, you literally only have that one point of connection. But when you're a Christian, you're brought into a family. So it's not just a friendship anymore. So we're brothers in Christ. But not only that, I consider Jacob my actual brother, blood related or not, because it has that depth to it because of Christ. And then everything else that we have, similarly, like whether it's games or other, similar interests, that's all just a bonus. But the core of our relationship is that we're both believers and we've served together, which adds a whole other dynamic. So that adds, like a whole lot more depth. But yeah, in terms of roles, like, I think there's both similarities and differences between me and Jacob. But I think both the similarities and differences complement each other in our friendship. And it's interesting because you wouldn't think differences do that. But similarly in relationships, you see, like, for example, I know a lot of probably, like, more our parents' generation, but, like, the mum, one or the other, one would be more introverted, but one would be more extroverted. But yet somehow they fit together perfectly. Yeah. But that's a difference. But then they have so many more similarities as well. So I feel like a mixture of similarities and differences sort of work together, as weirdly as that sounds.
Do you find that, like, there are any time, maybe it was something that you have dealt with, or maybe you're dealing with, or you just haven't dealt with, where it's like, maybe from Mark's perspective is like, Jacob isn't doing this enough, or from your perspective, Marcus isn't doing this enough, and it's just like, it's like you're putting in something, and you sort of want the friendship to be one certain way, or you want to see something from the friendship that's not, like, that you're not receiving, or it feels like maybe you're putting in more effort or whatever it is, but it's just sort of different approaches. that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know if I felt that. I wonder if there is also something slightly different, though, with friendships. I mean, there's expectations for some things, but I think there's maybe less expectations on other things. Maybe sort of slightly differently to a marriage, where I think, especially if they're working together and say you have kids, there is some expectation to each other and what you're doing and how you're doing it together. So I don't know if that happens. Maybe I think if we're serving together or whatever and we're doing something and like maybe one of us is a bit more tired could contribute a bit more like in that circumstance. They have occasionally fallen asleep or played games instead. So like maybe when you're actually actively doing something, there's maybe that sort of mindset can occasionally creep in. But I think usually the sort of solution is reading the room and seeing how we feel and say, okay, should this be something we pick up later? Because I think the difference is rarely like the fundamental core of a person. It's more like circumstantial what's happening around that time. But I don't know if you feel any differently.
No, I feel very similar to Jacob. I never expected anything more of him. I mean, he's already such a great friend. I really couldn't ask more. If anything, I think opposite. Like, I feel like there's parts that I'm failing in my relationship with Jacob because I feel like as the older person in our friendship, I should be a bit more mature, a bit more wiser, a bit better with my words or with my ways to be an encouragement to Jacob. And then sometimes, but I'm too either emotional or like outpouring of what's really on my heart that I don't want that to affect. It's not about his view of me. I mean, I know he holds me in high regard as well, but it's like I don't want to be a discouragement to him at the same time, but I also want to be honest with him too. So I guess one of the things that I've learned in our friendship is like try and always be a positive influence as much as possible. Like, yes, there are going to be things that bother you, and I think one of the things that I've learned from Jacob a lot in the last couple of years is learning to let go. Being a bit more of an emotional person, I tend to latch onto things a lot more. But there are some things, no matter how much you latch onto it, it's not beneficial for you. So it's just learning about, just accept it and move on. What's in the past is in the past. Just look forward and look to, what's to come. And I think that's one of the I think we've mentioned it before in another episode as well, where, Satan loves to remind us of our past as a way of distracting us from our main priority and our main goal. But it's one of the great things that I've learned, through our friendship, that it's okay to let go of things, especially things that are going to weigh you down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. The reason why I ask like that question, I don't know if I worded it very well, but it's because when I asked you the struggles that you've had in friendships, I was relating to what you were saying, where it's like sometimes you feel like you put in too much effort or a lot of effort. But what was interesting is that to me, that's like, it seemed like, oh, you want someone else to reach out to you, that kind of stuff. But then you speak about Jake, your best friend, and it's like he doesn't necessarily do that. But that's why I was like, was there any time in life where it's like, Jacob, why aren't you not reaching out, sort of thing? Or does he just feel in like what he lacks there, he gains in other aspects in life? If that makes sense.
I think, yeah, I see what you're coming from now, but it's like, yeah, he may not, like, if you were to weigh out like how much I contact him versus him contacting me, yeah, I guess you could say there's maybe a little bit of an imbalance there. But even whatever that is, in my mind, he could not contact me at all.
Yeah.
And I'm still be okay with that because of how close we are.
Okay.
But yet, and I'm not sure if that means I'm expecting more from others or anything like that. But I think it just speaks to the closeness that we have. Yeah.
Maybe you just give a better, what is it, like sort of better assumption for people that you're closer with. They assume, oh, they must be busy or they must be doing this. So like, it's not about me. It's like maybe because you can be confident that it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't like me, or it's not that they like, don't want to see me. Like now I can sort of understand their life a little bit better. So maybe that helps sometimes.
It's funny though. I'm a firm believer in replying to people very quickly. But sometimes I'll message Jacob and it takes 2 business days to get back to me. But I've learned to live with that.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. And he'll apologize. I'm like, no, it's fine. And yet someone else will do that. I'm like, this guy didn't get back to me. He must not like me. So like, it's weird, but it's somehow the dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a lot of the things that you're saying, Marcus, I'm like relating to. It's really cool that like it gives me sort of like hope, because Marcus probably knows about Jake. You probably don't know. Like my life prior to my current church has been struggle for friendships, massive struggle for friendships, and it felt like I was putting in a lot of effort. I was the initiator. I was the one doing things. No one really my age, sort of thing. But it's cool to see, like, obviously now it's a bit it changed a bit for me. I think I came into the age where like it's like everyone's the same age, even though there's like like a whatever 5 to 10 year gap. But yeah, it's cool to me because it's like I have friends that don't reach out, and I have friends that like it feels like they're not putting in effort, or maybe it's just like my perception of them, or whatever. But so it's a encouragement to me. I hope it's encouragement to everyone else that's watching as well. Question is, how did you so how did the closeness start? Was it just natural? Was it like something that you just, was it just by like maybe asking him to hang out, or like what was it?
I think it probably does start with doing things together, like, and you know, in that context, when we were both already sort of serving independently on, say, camp committee or whatever that was happening, and it sort of takes someone else to be like, oh yeah, you two should maybe pair off for this thing. And I think already at that point they knew we probably had similar interests and, you know, similar stuff, which is how sort of any sort of friendship starts, and you have to chat about something, right? Like, and so something in common is like that. But I think the serving together sort of opens the door for more time and more openness, and for, you know, getting to know a person a little bit better in a lot of those ways. So I think I think it's the start of the closer, or the closest part.
I think a lot of it happened organically, though, for sure. I think I agree with what Jacob is saying. Like, it may have started a bit more structured, as it were, or forced. But just over time, it just grew and grew and grew. And it's funny because I kind of assimilate it with, like, for example, the relationship I have with my parents, or the relationship I have with my family. And it's like, you know, you think you've reached the maximum at which you can love someone, but somehow it just keeps going and it just doesn't stop. And I feel like that should be with any real relationship that you have, that it doesn't get to a certain point and then it's like, okay, I've reached the maximum level I'm going to reach in that relationship. No, it just keeps growing and growing, and you learn more about that person, because you can never fully know a person. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but I don't fully know myself. So if I don't fully know myself, how am I going to fully know, you know, someone else? And I feel like a lot of people would have that struggle as well. So it's just about that learning process. And like I said, like with what I learned with Jacob over the last couple of years, that's literally been over the last couple of years, and we've known each other many more years, you know, than that. And I feel like with the years to come, there's probably a lot more things that I'm going to learn as well. And I think the Bible portrays a very good image of how we ought to be constantly learning. And that's not just about, you know, knowledge, but learning about ourselves, learning about others, and that just doesn't stop. Yeah.
Amazing. I like I said before, I love it. It's encouraging, and it's very cool to see this, right? I do have more questions, so we can get to those. Do you think there's a difference between guy friendships and girl friendships? Ooh. And what are like the main differences, you would say, if you have an answer?
So just to clarify, you're talking guy and guy relationships versus girl and girl relationships, or guy and guy versus guy and girl relationships?
No, just guy and guy, girl and girl.
Okay, just to clarify.
Guy and girl is. Yeah,
I mean, I've not been in any girl and girl relationships.
Yeah, kind of hard to do that when you're
not quite possible. But I mean, I do understand a lot of the time them to be quite different. Like, I mean, it depends. They're talking about, you know, whether guys are likely to catch up over coffee, or like whether girls are more likely to catch up over coffee, what they're likely to do in something like a catch up, what they're likely to say. Like, I think when they get close enough, there's a strong similarity, because, you know, someone who's a very close friend is a very close friend, like in all circumstances. But I would be willing to bet that they would start a little bit differently, at least.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference between a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I think that just speaks to more about how we're built as men and women. And I think that alone would, you know, cause the differences there. I think girls would probably be a lot more emotionally invested in their relationships, just, you know, being, you know, the gender that they are. I mean, we're emotionally, I definitely can say that for me and Jacob as well. So I guess that's sort of a similarity, but it's like, guys would, I guess, best friends that are guys would normally do more guy things. And we played like badminton, we've played table tennis in the past and tennis. So we like, doing that. But we also like video games. So he's got like a VR headset, PlayStation. These are guy things that you would generally do. It's not like we're doing each other's hair or something like that.
That'd be very interesting.
I just got a very weird mental picture of that.
I don't have much hair really to do anything with.
Yeah, thank God we don't have hair to maintain. Apologies to all the girls out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, that's what I mean. Like, we just, with our friendship, it's just we're more guy inclined. So maybe we aren't so good at expressing our emotions all the time. But and I think that would be the difference between guy and guy relationships versus girl and girl relationships. Don't really have much more to say.
Yeah,
to that.
I'm thinking stereotypically the girl best friends will be like, oh girl, you've got this, or you're so good, or you. I feel like there's a lot more of the words and maybe that sort of direct encouragement. Yeah, which admittedly Mark is very good at. I'm not very good at. So like, this is a thing where like it's hard because everyone is different and you do get like different personalities. But that's probably maybe more stereotypically like that. Whereas I think with the guy thing, it's okay to just be more revealed. Like you see it, you see the time, you see the the need and what you do and do that together. But can't say that that's not true for some girl and girl friendships. So I don't know.
Like case in point, the other day I was at his house. We had just finished a Connect group and we just had I felt like we had a really, really great conversation. And I was really, really thankful for that. And so I got home and I messaged him and was like, thank you so much for running the study. Thank you so much for the great chat. I love being your brother in Christ. Like, it's just so awesome doing life with you. And the reply I got back was, cool. No. But he actually said this. He was like, thank you for the encouragement. I never know the words to say back.
Yeah.
But that's just who Jacob is. And that's fine. Like, that's okay. But like, I don't mind giving him those words of, affirmation. But him appreciating that is more than enough. He doesn't need to give me those words back. But and not to say that he doesn't encourage me. He definitely does. But yeah, I guess that's the uniqueness of our friendship.
Yeah, that's cool. I have a lot of questions, but I'll pick this one.
We got time.
What will actually no? I'm gonna pick a different one. It's a bit of an activity because I'm curious.
Ooh.
Maybe it might be a bit awkward, but that's okay. So love languages.
Ooh.
So there's five of them.
Yep.
I think I have marks in a spreadsheet.
Have you guys done this before? Have you guys done like
yes.
the love language?
Yeah.
And you guys have showed each other?
Yeah.
Okay. All my activities ruined.
Oh, sorry.
This is the depth of our friendship. So yeah, you're gonna find a lot of those.
I was gonna ask, like, if you had to guess what the other person's love language is, would you be able to? So would you be able to? I mean, you guys know.
Do you
it.
remember?
So I haven't opened the spreadsheet yet. I think that there's ones that you can like clearly like see it, and they do say you often speak the language that you want to receive. So like Mark is very good at giving words of affirmation, so you'd often rank like words of affirmation quite high on a list like that. But I think we both do like physical touch, which is good, like hugs, and quality time. Otherwise, we wouldn't be chatting for hours at a time.
Yeah.
So, like, there is something there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember mine, but
yeah, I struggle with the love languages because it's like they're all so good. I want all of them. I don't just want one of them. What do you? Like I like gifts. Like for me, when I did it, I think gifts were ranked last.
Yep.
That doesn't mean I don't like gifts. Mind you, Jacob has given me some cracker gifts before. Like literal, like amazing gifts. And I'm not saying he's my friend because of that. But
if he didn't, we wouldn't be this close.
Yeah. But I mean, like, that's what my point is. Like, I love all of the love languages. I don't, have set, preferences on. Well, that's just me. I think for you, I would say.
I have the results right in front of me now.
No, don't show me. I need to work this out because I want to say words of affirmation, but that's what I give you. But
yeah, I think that's you thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
It turns out thinking about other people is really hard.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple of games that we like to play.
I would say acts of service.
Yeah. Okay, my self-report on that test is not very good for one of those reasons, which is I think I do appreciate acts of service. I think it is powerful, but I think I'm also, and this is probably not a good thing, but like there's maybe some assumption that some of that stuff is standard or default, like whatever they ask you in the test, and partner does the dishes, and you're like, yeah, I mean that's nice, but the other thing's more meaningful because it's not that dishes are not exclusive to a relationship kind of thing.
Look, the test is very weird. Like some of the questions, I'm just like no one's ever going to answer that.
Yeah.
This way.
Well, and it's
but you'd be surprised. Some people do.
Yeah,
it's a very binary system the way that the question is done.
Yeah.
I prefer a physical hug over getting a gift. Well, they're both great. I mean, again.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you want to know what the results are for the two of us?
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
So, Mark, your one, you got touch as the number one. It was 40%, which is the highest you could score for any of those things. And time was number 2 at 27%, followed by affirmation at 17,
Yep.
service at 13, and gifts at 3. Like
that tracks.
Yeah, and then mine was time as number 1 at 37%, so my number 1's your number 2, and touch as number 2 at 23, so my number 2 is your number 1. So it's quite close together, I think, for those. And then somehow I had a 3-way tie between affirmation, service, and gifts. They're all at 13%. So yeah, it's interesting to see. I don't think it's important that they're the same, the love languages. I think it is helpful when they are the same. For some of them, I think for something like acts of service, they don't have to be the same, because if one person needs to be served, like you don't have to have the other person needed to be served at the same time. Like it's kind of weird for that to be simultaneous.
Outserve each other.
But things like time and touch, it's helpful if it's the same, because that means there's not questions about what should we do in a car ride? Well, we can chat, right? Like we literally, for like some of our 3-4 hour drives, we're just talking the entire time. Right, and if the person doesn't really feel like quality time is a big thing, like that's probably not going to happen. And there could be deep topics, right, from like everything.
In hindsight, it makes sense why I was so thirsty on our drives, because we were talking so much.
you constantly needed that. Yeah. So yeah, it is helpful, I think, that they are aligned in that way. I do struggle, and this is when I guess when it comes to other relationships, I don't think they have to be like always super compatible. Like even that Myers-Briggs personality test, they have like a matrix, which is like how personalities should go together or not. And I think my parents are in this like, give this another think, like this should not work. And other people's parents were in the same category. And you're like, well, clearly they're fine. Or like maybe they made it harder for themselves than they should have. I don't know. But like there's clearly this is missing something. And I think Shady, a friend of mine, well, cousin's husband, said something that was, I compromise for my wife in ways I don't compromise for anybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's missing from that whole personality test thing. It was all about who would you need to compromise the least for. And you're like, well, you need to compromise the least for yourself because they are like you, right? But the reality is that that's not necessarily what you need for a relationship. There's things that matter, like similarities and mindsets, and centering on Jesus. And that allows for flexibility and differences in other things, like pushing each other about, well, okay, we believe this as Christians. How do we actually act that way? Or, if you're in government, would you make that policy? Like there was something that we had conversations about in the US. And it's pushing because it comes from the same basis that like, hey, we want to do this right thing together, right? We want to do what Christ wants us to do. What does that look like? And sort of answering that for ourselves.
And I think this goes back to the point I was making about Christian relationships are very different to any other sort of relationships, because the dynamic that adds is just huge. Yeah.
So the reason why I asked the question is because I was trying to allude to the point that you just made. It's like love languages aren't actually for yourself. It's for the people around you. I think I may have said this on a podcast before or somewhere else. I don't know. But it's for the people around you. It's for your future partner. It's for those people, because they need to actually, okay, Jonah likes this and this, but he doesn't really like, receiving gifts is a bit like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel guilty if someone gives me a gift that's overly expensive.
I appreciate it, but I would much prefer like, do something kind sort of thing, like an act of service. But maybe they just really love gift giving. And I will always appreciate that because that's what they love. But also from their end, they'll have to be like, okay, Jonah doesn't really, he's not super receptive to receiving gifts. So I actually need to maybe, even if it's not natural to me, I need to do something for him, whether it's, I don't know, act of service or word of affirmation or something. And it's interesting because I think when we look at love languages, it's very like self-obsessed. It's like, okay, what are the best ways that I can experience love, sort of thing. But I think bringing the Christian into it is like, no, I need to sacrifice, even if words of affirmation is difficult for me. Maybe I won't overdo it because it's very it's uncomfortable for me. But there are times where I'll be like, Marcus, you're a great friend. I don't know. It's very, very. I wasn't gonna get open up on the podcast, but like again, that's when I'm like, yeah, I'm actually gonna share some words, even if it's super hard for me, because now I'm sacrificing whatever it is, my comfort or dignity or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. That's the reason why I asked that question, because yeah, I think we often sort of think about ourselves when it comes to love languages. So that's I was just wondering.
I think the reason why physical touch mattered so much for me is I think about my mum a lot. Like when she hugs me. I love you, mum, by the way, if you're listening to this. But the reason I mention that is because like when my mum hugs me, for me, like, okay, I'm a mama's boy, no worries. But I feel like her hugs could cure cancer. Like, honestly, I genuinely believe that. Like, it's like when I hug her, I could have had the most miserable, traumatic experience ever. She doesn't even have to say anything. She'll just be like, come and give me a hug. Mind you, she's a bit shorter than me, so when she hugs me, her head is like bracing, and she's like, I love you, but you're breaking my neck. But honestly, I feel the most safest, loved, and appreciated when I'm hugging my mum. Now, that also translates into the hugs that I give other people. Like when I hug I hug him and my head is at his chest. But at the same time, I feel like that's beautiful as well, because like I feel safe with him. I think a hug speaks volumes more than words can ever say. So I try and make an effort to hug. That sounds predatory, but
Thank goodness.
Wow. Context is important, people.
I'm gonna clip that.
That's the short.
That's the blooper. But sorry, that was a random thought. But I mean, like, what I'm trying to say is like the value of a hug is huge, at least for me, which is why it ranks so highly.
And actually, on that, the fact that you mentioned that you think it comes so strongly from the hugs you had with your mum, I think that is common for all of us, or a lot of us. Now, you don't have to be your parents. You're not destined to be your parents. But a lot of times, what you've seen, what you've experienced, what you did with them, that becomes a bit of you and who you are and part of your personality. And I did that love language test for my parents. They kept on telling me, it's too late for us. I'm like, no, that's not the point. Like, it's always good to know.
Too late.
But my top two come from their top two. Touch is last for my mum. Like, scored 0%. It was amazing. But it's quite high for my dad, and I got that from him. But quality time is quite high for my mum, and I got that from her. And you can really see the influence there. And I think that's another thing with friendship. It's not required, but we do know each other's parents. We do know each other's family. And I think that sort of adds to the friendship in our case, as opposed to necessarily subtracting from it. Sometimes there are relationships where it's hard because, I don't know, one set of parents doesn't approve the other friend or the other partner or whatever. So, that can occur. But I think in our cases, it's only really helped. We can feel comfortable around each other's parents. I've definitely, showed up to Mark's house once or twice, and Mark was still on the way. And his dad was like, here is a puzzle. Like, which was very much like his dad, but also like me and like Mark. So like it works. So yeah, I think that's a big part of that as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's cool. I think love languages is like, I think naturally you'll probably just tell. Like, I haven't done the test in so long, but I could probably tell you what my love languages are, sort of thing. But also, if you ask anyone that's close to me, they'll be like, oh yeah, Jonah's love languages are this. But yeah, love languages, I always feel like it's a weird thing, but it makes sense.
You would hope that you can tell, and you would hope that other people around you could say things. But I feel like what I've observed in a lot of people is some level of blindness when you're like, you clearly, like, that person's not responding as well, right? You're only giving gifts because, you really like gifts, right? Like, and so you assume, well, this is the thing. This is how I feel when I receive. Surely this is how they'll feel when I give.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the case. Like, it can be. But I think that important thing is what you were saying. The love language is not about you. It's about others, right? It's about understanding that others can be different to you. And they can be similar to you, but like sort of acting appropriately. I think with them.
The thing is, like, this might be going on a bit of a tangent, but I mean, when it comes to the concept of, like, say, for example, gift giving, right? I had a conversation with someone about this because I was telling them, like, if God blesses me with a family one day, I want to be able to give my kids what my parents gave me. An example of that is that usually at Christmas time when I was little, they'd have like a little Santa sack, one for me and one for my sister Cindy. And from the beginning of December, every couple of days, they'll load a present into the sack. So 1st of December, here's a present. But it was wrapped. You wouldn't know what it is.
Yeah.
So one in the bag. 3rd of December, here's another one. 6th of December, here's another one. So by the time we got to the 25th of December, I have this massive sack of presents.
Yeah.
And then, like, closer to the day, it's like the Christmas Eve, and me and my sister are sitting there, and we're like, can we just open one? We're so, like, we've been waiting since the beginning of the month to open these. And they're like, all right, have one. And then Christmas Day was up, tear up everything. We're going crazy, like screaming at every gift we're getting. Like, we're just having an amazing time. Now, in today's world and today's economy, that's really, really hard to do. But I was having a conversation with someone, like, and I was like, man, I don't know if I can do that for my children. Like, life is getting harder. Things are getting more expensive. And the guy I was talking to was just reminding me, the best thing you can give to someone is yourself. It's not about what you can give them. It's nice, don't get me wrong. But the best thing you can give someone is you. The time you spend with them, the conversations you have with them, the secrets that you keep between just you and that other person. Like, that's of much more value than any gift you could ever buy them. So then when it comes to like a love language comparison, it's like, well, if you think about it in that context, should they be considered on the same level? I mean, like, obviously people would be more appreciative of one over the other, but at the same time, do they hold the same weight, as it were? Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The only thing I would say is, like, some people, like for you, like from what I've heard, it's easier for you to like have words of affirmation to Jacob. It doesn't, like, just because maybe Jacob doesn't receive that well or whatever. I'm sure he does, but let's say he just like he didn't like receiving that. He still has to appreciate that that's who you are, and you're actually giving a piece of yourself to him. Even if he hated it, it would be like, no, Marcus is he's just the best way he knows how. He's showing me that he loves me, sort of thing. And I think if maybe your parents were doing that through gifts, there are many people, like, I'm gonna shout him out, probably not watching, but Jason from church, he is the most amazing gift giver. Like, his heart is second to none when it comes to that, and you can clearly tell, like, that's a gift of the Spirit that he has. And there will never go a time where if he gives me a gift that I'm not going to appreciate it, even if it's like, Jason, like, I love you, but man, you're doing way too much, like, in a loving way, because I'm like, like what you were saying before, like, I feel bad because I haven't given him anything. But I'm showing him love in the best way I know how. Maybe it's just words of affirmation, maybe it's just quality time, but I think from both ends you have to appreciate both things. You know what I mean?
It's funny you mentioned that. You reminded me of a situation. Both of us were at a friend's wedding and I was asked to play the piano at the wedding. At the wedding ceremony. So that was like as the bride was walking down the aisle, during the hymns and whatsoever. And these people, like, these couple are a very lovely couple, and they gave a thank you card and like $100 gift voucher to everyone that helped.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's very generous, but I simply cannot accept it, because what I did for you, I did it for you because I love you. I didn't do it to get anything out of it. I love you, and I am honored that you would ask me to be a part of your special day. So as much as you want to give this to me, I can't accept it. So I'm going to give that back to you, and I just want you to be thankful and appreciate, everything that our friendship means to us, because that's how much I care about you. Yeah,
that's cool.
Meanwhile, I think I was also involved in that wedding, and it said something along those lines: "Oh, you shouldn't have whatever," but they wanted to do it. I think I just took it and gave it to someone else. No.
Wow, that's interesting.
But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard line, because like I'm with you on that. With like, I didn't do it for this, right? Like, this is not the reason why. But then also they want to give it, and then you're like, oh no, and I don't want to stop that. Like, so I was never really sure about where to stand on something like that.
But like Jacob was saying before, like we may not have like the same love languages at the end of the day. It definitely helps. But like you were saying before, we've acclimatized to each other's love languages. And I think that matters more than having the same love languages. And I think maybe even I was having a conversation with someone about relationships in general, and even they were saying like it doesn't hurt to be a little bit more open-minded. Like if you have all of these qualities that you want in someone, then you're limiting your options to a very specific set of people. And you may be compatible. I mean, like the Bible tells us that as long as they're a believer, then everything else is secondary. So, and I think that goes with building friendships as well. Like if you want to have more friends, then you need to be a bit more adjustable and a bit more accommodating for your own preferences, but especially with how, they treat you too. Yeah,
I agree. I have a hot take.
Oh,
Let's hear it.
It's maybe not very hot, but
No,
it's about
lukewarm take.
lukewarm take. Yeah, it's about giving and receiving gifts, and maybe not just gifts, but just in general. I think maybe it's in the Middle Eastern world.
I have lots of thoughts on Middle Eastern giving.
For some reason, we can't receive. I think we're very giving nations. When like if we go out for dinner, I'll be like, no, I'll pay.
Yeah.
And then
You did that for me the other week.
I think that was the last podcast, wasn't it?
Was it?
No,
it was that.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Anyway, doesn't matter.
I insisted that you don't, but you more insisted that you will.
I think this is whenever I do it, and then people fight me on it. I always say, bro, Jesus said, "It's more blessed to give than it is to receive." So let me give, so I can be more blessed. So I throw it on them.
Yeah,
and then they're fighting for the blessing. Though. That's the
the
problem. I had to explain this to a younger person because we went somewhere and I paid for something that he had. He's like, "Oh no, my friends wanted me to pay," and I was like, "Look, this is how it works. You're Arab, I'm Arab. Like you have to make the effort, but I have to force to not accept it. Like that. This is the game we're playing. Like I'm the older one, you're the younger one." And Mark knows me. I quite like games. I quite like strategy. I quite like figuring out the rules. I spent years trying to figure out the rules of Egyptian culture because there are cultures where there are stronger rules. Like you go to a Korean culture, a Japanese culture, a Chinese culture, where there are like a more senior person pays. A friend of mine went to Japan and they didn't split the bill equally. They split the bill based on seniority. Like most senior person paid like 70% and next person paid like 10% and next. Yeah, it was like a way where they could split it. That kind of made sense within the culture that was showing this kind of same idea. But for us, it's just fight over the money and whoever like fights the most wins. Like I don't know. So I've tried to in those cases allow for sometimes small wins. Like okay, I paid for mains, but then if they lost the fight, they can pay for dessert. Like there's something like that where trying to be sensitive to a culture and knowing what the appropriate role is to play sometimes because it's not always
but
easy.
Good luck trying to get into a fight with Jacob's dad
because
one time we went out to eat and it was like not a whole church but like a big part of our church went out to eat and then he without even me knowing he had paid and I only realized that because I went to pay and they're like, no, you don't need to pay anything. I'm like, wait, what? So I went to him and I found out he paid and I went to give him the money. He pushed my hand back into my pocket and he's like, you're my son, you're not paying. And I was like, okay, I'm not fighting you.
Yeah, it's always hard. It's always harder with like the older
and,
guys because it's just like I don't want to disrespect you, but also like, come on.
And I find it's so, I don't know what the right term for it is. I'm not going to say annoyed because it's not the right, but you'll see what I mean. When I was younger, people would pay for me. And I'd be like, no, don't. All right, fine. And then they would tell me, when you're older, you'll pay. That hasn't happened yet.
It never happens. Yeah.
No, you still.
I think what they meant is when you're older, you'll pay for other people's kids, like for other people who are younger. This is why, I think it does exist in the culture. That older people, especially, I think, would try to push for it more.
This is like you with the board games. You don't give all the rules. You find out the rules a lot later when it's too late and you're about to lose.
No one in Egyptian culture will tell you any of the rules.
Yeah,
this is a slight sidetrack, but even no one told me that Arabic was gendered. In terms of even the colors were gendered. I knew some of the words were gendered, male, female, but the fact that there's ahmar and hamra, or Azra and Zar'a, which are red, feminine, masculine. No one explained to me that it was a gender thing, and the gender thing had to match the gender of the noun. And I confronted my parents about this because I sort of realized it when I was doing French in year 7 or 8 or whatever, and I was like, "Hey, French is gendered." wait, is that what Arabic is? And my friends are like, what? Gender? No idea what you're talking about. Like, and it's not, they weren't even aware of the rules. They just use it correctly because when it's your own language, so that's what happens. But I think it happens with culture. Like, they don't know the explicit rules of culture. That's just what happens, right? That's just what they do. And like us as second generation, somehow between Australian and Egyptian, we have to work that out. But that's not the same problem that they have.
There's also the other dynamic as well about the receiving of the gift. It's kind of like you should feel guilty if someone pays for you. I've never met an Arab who's received anything as like, cool, they paid for me. No, there's always that level of guilt that remains inside of you.
Look, this is why I said it's a hot take, because I think even culturally, I think we just need to get rid of it. Like, not fully, but we need to...
Jacob would be a huge advocate for that. Yeah.
We need to get rid of like if Marcus, you pay for me, obviously I'm like, no, you don't have to. But if you're like insistent, insistent. Well, that didn't sound right. If you're insistent, then like, I'm like, okay, he wants to, sort of thing. I feel like you should be able to tell if someone's just doing it out of like,
lightness,
I know I need to pay for him or whatever. Like, most people actually want to. Just let them. Like, there have been many times where I've allowed people to pay for me because they want to. It doesn't really feel good for me, to be honest.
Yeah, but then again, you can play on that, because it's like, as the receiver, if I keep on letting him pay, then I'm going to think that he thinks, oh, this guy just makes me pay him for everything. He's just expecting me that I insist that I will pay.
No, but that's why, like, I remember I went out with Bashar. I think it was like first time I went out with Bashar, like one-on-one. And he asked me like, oh, where do you want to go? Do you want to go somewhere like fancy, or do you want to go just like Nando's? I was like in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna pay for him, so let's go somewhere fancy. So I get there, we have dinner and everything, and then he brings out his card. He's like, no, Bashar, what are you doing? And he's like, there is no way you're paying. He said this to me. I was like, bro, okay.
It gets aggressive sometimes, doesn't it?
I was like, all right. I'm like, I'll get next time then. But I was like, I fully said fancy restaurant. I said all this stuff so I could pay. And he's like, no. And maybe that's like, again, he's an Arab. So maybe it's the Arab, maybe it's seniority, whatever it is. Like,
I don't mind the offers. I kind of like it, but I just think we need better defined rules. Like, everyone has to offer to pay once. And then if you offer to pay on top of that, that's just a you thing. That's not a cultural thing.
Jacob and I have had fights. It's whoever can get to the terminal first.
I mean, that's all paid. Honestly, I know it's an ad, but the fact that you can get payment on your watch really, it lets you beat a lot of people in those sorts of fights. But you remind me of a cultural explanation. So once did a course called Engaging with Muslims at uni. It was like trying to talk to them in evangelism. And they were talking about sort of Arab mentality. And they're saying an Egyptian man went to an Australian person's house once, and they're there, and they're there for tea. And the Australian person offered tea. Would you like tea? And the Egyptian man was dying to have some tea, really, really wanted some tea. But to be polite, he said, no tea. And then the Australian guy said, okay. And then didn't make him tea. And the Egyptian guy was like shocked, because the expectation is that, no, you keep on offering, you keep on insisting, and then eventually they accept. And that's what happens. But because that didn't happen, that cultural clash, the guy just went home with no tea. And not really sure what had happened in that circumstance.
I had an opposite experience to that, actually.
Oh, yeah?
This was many, many years ago. So when I was at uni, I had another really great friend, the Egyptian guy, and we went to a birthday party for an Aussie girl. Now, normally in an Egyptian or a Middle Eastern culture, they'll have the spread available as soon as you get in. Come eat, like all that kind of stuff. There was nothing set up when we got there. And we were there for like 3 or 4 hours. And then my mate was like, can I have a piece of bread? Like, he was, because we got there hungry. Yeah, okay. And we were waiting for so long, and they're like, oh, we're so sorry, we didn't know you were hungry. And my mate is losing it, like, bro, I came here like borderline but to pass out.
It's a culture. It's very
a bit of that culture clash. But yeah, no, look, on the giving and receiving thing, I do think we could be better articulated in Egyptian culture. I don't think we're really thinking of others in that way. Like, I think what they're trying to do in that culture is they're like, try to be light, don't be a burden on people. And the like constantly refusing and eventually giving in is better than just immediately saying, yeah, sure, let's do that, you pay. I think that's what they're trying to achieve. But yeah, it can get crazy sometimes.
Just honestly, if you allow someone to pay for you and you're appreciative, I feel like that goes like so much longer, like further away than like me fighting you to pay. You know what I mean?
But going back to what Jacob was saying, I think Jacob touched on a very, very good point, and I think it links back really, really well with friendships. Is
that was a massive tension.
But he was talking about communication. And I think with Middle Eastern culture, it's a huge problem. And I think us as second generation Middle Easterners being brought up in a Western culture, we sort of understand that and we try to accommodate for that. But that's something that Jacob and I have always appreciated about one another. Like, we know how to communicate. And I guess that comes with time. We never knew how to do that, like, right off the bat. But the more you get to know a person, the more you know how you can communicate them. You know the lines, like I was talking about the borders, like what is considered too offensive or what's not considered offensive. Although I will say in the last couple of years, Jacob's come out with a few comments that I never thought Jacob would come out with. But it's been great because I'm like, you would never say that. Like, that's so cool.
Like offensive comments?
No, not offensive. It's just, I don't know how would you, I don't want to reveal too much.
That's fine.
I just jokes and things.
Yeah,
I feel like because Mark's a very funny guy, and I don't know if I ever saw myself that way. But I do think being around Mark with all the comedy that he listens to or everything else, you can't sort of help but get influenced to that degree. So there probably is a little bit more on that end than maybe I would have done naturally. But yeah, on the communication thing. And I think it becomes easier sort of the deeper friends you are. Because there is less that is off limits or, out of bounds. If you're just meeting someone for the first time, there's only certain things you're allowed to say socially. Although, honestly, I would much rather have the deeper conversation from day one. But that's a whole other thing. But yeah, being able to be honest and open with each other, a bit of a cliche, but is really important. And that means that in lots of ways, not talking euphemistically, like just using actual words and their actual meanings. Like, just I don't want to be confused. Let's not get anything let's not get anything mixed up. You mean this, right? Like, okay, cool. Like that's what we're talking about. That's what we mean. Saying things as they are, and
that's the thing. Like, communication coupled with honesty. That's a really big thing. That speaks to the depth of your friendship, because I think there's a proverb that talks about that as well. Like,
the wounds of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy.
Yeah,
I was thinking about it. I was going to mention it earlier.
Yeah.
It's bad that we finished each other's proverb.
Yeah, but there's another proverb as well that I was thinking of, where it's like, a fool will comfort you, whereas a true friend will hurt you. Kind of giving the notion that sometimes the truth will hurt, but it's sometimes very, required.
Very paraphrased, I think.
Yeah. This is from the message.
Yeah, I think that is important. I don't know if it's important in every friendship, but I think probably when you're getting to a deep one, is that idea of what I've heard described as a critical friend. And I think the word critical has been kind of ruined in the modern day. It sort of feels like it means now to someone who points out all the negative things. But I think critical is better than that. It is someone who tells you, sort of is independent, does an independent analysis almost, tells you when the things you've done that are right, right? Like, confirms that on that side. But also tells you when the things that you've done are wrong, like is able to help you in those ways as well. And I think it's the opposite to so they call it a fair weather friend. They're just saying things are good or always when things are good. Like, you want someone who is able to help in both of those circumstances, because anything else, and it just doesn't feel valid. Like, if someone's always saying the negative things, well, I can't really take your word for it, because sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not. If the other one's always saying the positive things, I can't take your word for that either, right? Like, because there's sometimes things are bad and you're not saying it. Like, you really do need to be able to be honest with those things. And honesty it's not just saying things really bluntly. Blunt could come as part of it. But like we read in the Bible, it's always speaking the truth in love. And it really has to go together. And I've had some conversations with people, recently or over the years about when it says that, is it saying to do these in separate circumstances, like speak the truth and also do things in love? But no, I think it really has to be in the one case. That if you are not telling someone a true fact or something that you're trying to help them with, whatever, you're not telling them out of an actual motivation of love, of wanting the person to do better or wanting the best thing for them, then you're saying it out of different motivations, out of jealousy, out of anger, out of spite. And those things, even if the truth is not the truth in love, and will absolutely ruin any comment that's said. So I think being able to have that honesty and that care for one another, I think enables you to have that communication like that.
And from my perspective, from what Jacob has talked about things with me in the past, I have never felt a negative connotation. It may have been critical in terms of like an in-depth analysis or, this Jacob's a very logical
cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
To a certain time.
But I have never felt bad about anything Jacob has said, no matter what we're talking about and no matter what light we're talking about things in. And that just goes to show the kind of quality that I've admired in Jacob. Sure. I don't know if I can say the same the other way around.
Jacob's like, it's just all been negative from my
most negative person I've ever known.
I think there are a few things in relationships as a whole, whether it's relationship with a parent or relationship with romantic relationship or friendship or whatever it is. There are a few things that from what I understand, what I've learned from God's word, from what I've learned from experience, a few things that are key. One is sacrifice, as Jesus has showed us. And we've already gone through. Communication is the other. From what I can, maybe there's one more that I'm forgetting, but from what I understand, those are the two biggest things: sacrifice and communication. Because without communication, it's everything is misunderstood. I could say something to you, or I could act a certain way, and you could think "Wow, Jonah it's out of malicious intent or something." When realistically, I'm thinking if I do this, then Marcus doesn't have to, whatever. I can be thinking of a whole different way where it's actually a loving thing. But if I'm not if you're not communicating to me hey, Jonah, this hurt me, I'm no, Marcus, that's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to make life easier for you. That's a dumb analogy, but all these different circumstances, communication is key. Sacrifice is key as well. And obviously I'm not married, but from what I've heard and sort of seen is those two things are just the most important thing in marriage. I'd rather be an over communicator, and I would rather be over communicated to than
and I think again that speaks to Middle Easterners. We're very good at bottling up things. Very, very good at that. But I agree. We do need to be a lot. It would be better to be a bit more talkative rather than just keep it bottled. Bottling it never does any good.
It just explodes.
I will say though, just on that topic of marriage, I've noticed. Sorry to take over your pod, but
you're the co-host. It's fine. You pick the topic now.
No, because you just kind of reminded me of a point, and I don't know if it's unavoidable or not. But I hope that I don't become like this. But I know that for a lot of people, that after they've got married, and especially after they start to have children, they have a lot less time for other people, and that definitely impacts friendships. And I know that, for a few people that I can think of that I was used to be really close with. Again, it's not that we had a fight or we just disliked each other or anything. But again, just going back to that point about you went down kind of different paths, it definitely draws back. And so then when I say that I'm trying to put more effort into the relationship, I have more time to put more effort into the relationship. They have family commitments, not just with, they're in their own household, but their extended family as well. And they want to meet other friends and they are involved in other ministries and what have you. Life can get quite busy. But I hope that if, God blesses me with a family and God blesses Jacob with a family, that won't affect our friendship. I definitely know it will, at least to some extent. But I know also of a few examples where despite that, people have still remained best friends. Case in point, when my dad moved here from Australia, he had a really, really good friend who's still friends with till today. And they left Egypt. They taught for 1 year in Iraq. They taught for 1 year in Malta, and then they finally migrated to here in Australia. And then they both got married here. I think that's how that story tracks. And I can imagine that after they got married and after they had children, that things would have been different. But till now, they'll still catch up. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was at a conference yesterday, so it's very timely that we're having this conversation today. It was a men's conference at the Katoomba Christian Convention, KCC, and the topic was about brotherhood. And there was two really good friends. One was a farmer, one was a pastor. And they've been friends for 40 plus years. And they've talked about, the difficulties that they've been through, especially being a farmer, going through drought, the amount of work that goes into being a farmer, and he'd open up to the pastor. The pastor doesn't know about farming, but he can at least be there as a support and to pray for him and to comfort him and what have you. And I thought it was so beautiful because he actually made that, not testimony, might not be the right word, but he was like, it has been a joy. He said, it has been a joy to have been your friend for the last 40 plus years, and I will continue to remain your friend until the day I die.
Yeah.
And the whole time, I told Jacob this later, I kept on thinking about Jacob because compared to them, we're not even halfway through.
quarter
What?
of the way,
Yeah.
I've not even gotten to 40 years myself.
Neither have I.
No,
Yeah.
neither.
But I'd like to think that if the Lord tarries, that till the day that I die, that I will continue to be, a good friend for Jacob.
I think with the whole marriage thing, obviously we haven't experienced this, so I assume that it's much more difficult. I've actually had conversations with people that I'm really close with that have been married, and I've had a tough conversation with them, like, what happened to you? What happened to you? But like,
why did you fall off a cliff? Like,
like what happened? And I think it's just like, maybe it's not even just busyness, but it's like their love is just poured into their children, or their love is poured into each other, which you can't really like hate. Then you can't really say much. I can't really physically tell you what that feels like. I can't tell you like how to get out of that, or like whatever it is, sort of thing. I've felt the exact same things, and I'm like, I don't know. I would hope that maybe I would put more intentionality with actually reaching out outside of the family, but it's much easier said now than it will be once I have that, if I have that. So I feel like you were saying something.
No, I know. I was just thinking about it, that it is it's one of those things, because you're right, like we see it happening in lots of cases, so there must be a reason for it, and time might be one thing, love put in other places is one thing. And I wonder if it's also sometimes like different stages of life make it harder. Like you talked about getting to the age group where everyone is sort of the same age now, like even though you're 10 years apart. But when people are married with like very young kids, they end up having very different struggles that are much more similar with other people with like married with young kids. Like, I don't know, not being able to sleep because the kid is awake all night. Things are just harder to relate to, although you have pets, so, Mark and I were at lunch with a couple last week, and one of them, the couple had like a young child, and Mark was telling them about Lucy's dog. He's like, oh yeah, just wants to sleep in my bed and wake me up. And the woman from the couple was like, oh yeah, me too. So there's apparently strong similarities between the animals. And
I think every parent would be like, if it's something, Jacob, how dare you can't say that.
I thought this was a parent. That reaction, and then they were like, no, me too. I'm like, oh, you take it really better.
Yeah, it was quite funny. But yeah, anyway, so like this thing, but I feel like those people, the farmer and the pastor, reminds me a little bit of Peter when he like talks to Jesus and says, oh, even though everyone forsake you, I will not forsake you. And I don't know if I have that much confidence in myself. Like I don't like.
Hang on a minute.
Not about you, but like even about like saying that to Jesus, I want to say that. I want that to be true. Which maybe comes back to that thing we talked about the relationship. Like I don't want this different churches to affect our relationship. I have no idea if that was what will happen or not. Right? Like I'm very hard to see the future, but I can share the vision. Like I think it's good. And I think the last year has been good practice for that at different churches. I think America was good. That was definitely a level up in friendship.
We level up. That was honestly, several levels up.
We talked about everything and anything on that. Like, like parenting, how that parenting affects you, how that would affect your children, how you see your culture, like, and how that, like, what do you do when you're in a mixed Australian Egyptian culture? Like, like what does that look like? And for me, it's got to be like sort of picking and choosing best parts and passing it on. But really, the thing I want my kids to know is that, hey, cultures are different, right? Like, and the important thing is understand it, right? Like, talk to your grandparents this way because they care, like respect for the grandparents. But talk to us, it doesn't really matter because we don't care so much because we're in a different boat. Like, and just understanding who you're talking to is a big deal. But yeah, we had all those conversations.
I learned a lot about politics on that trip. Actually,
it was the US.
Oh my gosh! Like it came up every
billboard sign that we passed, like half of them are about abortion because like big US thing. In states that were supporting it, talking about where they are, and states that are not supporting it, talking about why it's like not allowed. So it was one of those conversations. I even called one of their hotlines in the US that they said, call us and ask about whether Christians should vote. And I was like, yeah, I had a Christian should be part of politics. And so I had a conversation with the guy. It's an interesting conversation.
I don't think we should get into politics.
So they didn't think we should get into politics either. But they also didn't think we should vote, which I thought was interesting. I'm not sure I heard that before. But the point being, like that trip was another way that we could level up a little bit.
One of the things I noticed about Jacob, and Jacob will laugh at this, but like I knew Jacob was a lot like Sheldon before. This really amplified it for me.
Big Bang Theory.
Because like we went to the Grand Canyon, and I have never seen beauty like the Grand Canyon. Like it is just pictures and photos and pictures and photos, the same thing. And videos don't do it justice. You really have to be there. And this thing is ridiculously huge. So I saw it first by myself because Jacob was busy with a meeting. So he's like, I'll catch you up later. So I'm like, oh, you know, it would be cool. Like if we like blindfold you and then like lead you to the Grand Canyon and then reveal. I do that, reveal it, and he's like, oh, wow. Like just so passive.
That's the most extreme reaction you're going to get.
Exactly. But then something else happened later on in the trip that had nothing to do with like, it was like a ride at an amusement park. And he's like, the effects were so cool. And I'm like, bro, we just saw the Grand Canyon. Like, it just spoke to the differences between the way that we see things. Because, like, we make this joke all the time. There's a campsite we used to visit at Tukli with our other church. And you go through, like, it's towards Newcastle. So there's, like, a lot of mountains and greenery and forest. I'm like, Jacob, isn't this beautiful? Isn't it marvelous to see God's creation? Jacob will look at me and go, that's a nice bridge.
For the record, I'm a civil engineer, so that's
and so that for me used to frustrate, you know. But you know what? It's like we just think differently. It's fine. Like, I get it.
You said something in the US that like felt like it clicked. Was that about flowers or was it about nature? But there was something that you were saying. That was like because I was never flowers is an example. I've never really been someone who like couldn't appreciate flowers or like and nature is another one. I've never really been very good at appreciating it. And then I think it was you, Marky, was saying that you felt, I don't know if you remember it.
I do.
But you were just saying that like it sort of finally clicked with you that like, wait, you might just not like this. That like this is a possibility.
So I think, I don't know if I should be sharing this, but the analogy that I gave is like if you're interested in someone but they're not interested in you. I'm like, I get it now. He's just not interested in that.
but honestly, sometimes it is that clicking. Like, and from another side, I know like Marcus really values people who are being on time or being on time, and we have those conversations. And I learned a lot about like, it was instilled in him from his dad. There was like influence there, and you're like, I get that now. Like, you know, I'll try and respect that, and like we'll try and be part of that as much as possible.
It's very anti-Egyptian that kind of thing, to be on time. But my dad like really drilled it into me and my sister.
That's good.
And I think it's a huge
it does my head. I mean, I'm not the best with it, but like if I'm running late, I'll be very this is where communication comes in. I'll be very communicative. I don't know what's the word, but
like today we were at church. And we usually post on the group chat where we're going to go and what time. So like meet at the Acres at 1 p.m. And it was 12:55. I'm like, that's not happening.
That's what we call optimistic time.
We didn't get there until like 1:45 or something.
I got there at 1:20. I'm just waiting in the car. That's when I messaged you. I'm like, this place is packed.
To end off, I have one more question.
Oh.
It's already been an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I really don't notice the time on
this
these
is how
things.
our road trip worked.
True. And we spoke for so long.
We had many hours of driving.
We wanted to go to sleep and like, no, but I still have stuff to talk about. Just leave it for tomorrow, Mike. It's fine.
So I maybe don't know really know how to answer this, but what is the measurement of closeness? So you guys are very close friends, but what would be the measurement of that? Is it the amount you talk? Is it what you talk about? Is it just
Yeah, it's funny. I think it is multidimensional. I think amount you talk can be one of those things, like able to talk about pretty much anything and everything is like often a measure of closeness in that way. Whereas again, like with people you don't know as well, because you don't know what they're interested in, you don't know how to follow up on things, you can't get that same breadth. So that's something. But I think ironically, the opposite is also true, like able to be quiet and like not necessarily speaking in their presence. Like Mark and I had a deal when we were driving in the US. If I was driving, it was either we were chatting or I was listening to a podcast and he was trying to sleep or something. If he was driving, either we were chatting or he was listening to music and I was reading a book or something. Like there were times where we weren't necessarily talking, but there was our own things because you need your own time and you need your own things. So it's both being comfortable talking and also being comfortable not talking. Both of them somehow are a good measure of like the closeness of the friendship. And they're not the only ones. I think honesty is another one. And it's funny because it's both a measure and also an input, which is, scientists would hate that. But like you need to be honest to have that friendship develop and be able to, be honest with each other. But when you are closer, it sort of makes it easier to be honest and to open up more and those kinds of things. So I think there's couples of measures. I don't know if there's other measures you'd add.
No, it's weird though, because like when it comes to the honesty part, like I'm a very open book usually when it comes to people, and I don't mean to say that I'll tell everyone everything that I'm thinking, but I will think that there's probably some things I'll share with Jacob that I probably won't share with many other people.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I think that's one. The time that we spend together is, I think, a big factor too. There's a lot more time that I spend with Jacob that I would like if I'm thinking I've got time on my hands, what I want to do. Either doing my own thing, or if Jacob's free, let's do something together. I'd rather be with someone than trapped in my own thoughts. So I think that could be a good measure as well. Serving together, I think, is important too. Like it was the basis of our friendship. So whenever we get a chance to do that, that's awesome. And in fact, we visited the new church that he's going to at the moment, and it was something we talked about in America because that's actually where we discovered, that was happening. And we both kind of got excited because it was like, oh, there's a chance that we might serve again. That's going to be so cool if we do that.
And we got a taster of that. We were playing music a couple of Sundays. I went to your house and we practiced songs for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
So like it's a thing, and it's a thing.
Yeah, and it just kind of revived, that thing. I don't know if that will be a thing, in the future. I'm still praying about that and considering it. But service with friends, good friends, goes a long way, and our friendship is a testament to that.
Yeah. And I guess I was going to say, you're just talking before you mentioned the sort of teasing, which I think is a reflection of being comfortable with each other, which I think that the silence and the talking is another measure of that. And that, I guess what we were talking about before, the criticality, the ability to not just encourage, but also to lovingly help in like ways that they may be deficient or in ways that you think they could improve, I think is a good measure for close friendship.
I don't know if this is a true measure, but perhaps the amount of memes you send to one another. Because I'll be doom scrolling through Facebook or Insta, and a Lord of the Rings thing will pop up, and Jacob loves it, so I'll send it to him. The annoying thing though is that he has a 2-minute time limit on Facebook every day. So he's like, oh, that's going to use up my allotted time. I'm going to use that tomorrow. But he'll like obviously appreciate, those things. Again, 2 business day reply. But, but either way, like it's just, I don't know. It definitely means you're thinking about them a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think closeness is probably built, like there's a lot of different things like you guys were saying, but I think the best way to sort of say it maybe is like you can be shallow, but you can also be deep. I think that's a good way to be like, it can be I'm close with that guy. You know what I mean?
We didn't really get a chance to talk about this, but when I think about the relationship between David and Jonathan, like they were super, super tight. But when they were forced to part ways, they wept over each other. I don't know if Jacob and I have shared that kind of example before. We've wept over each other before, but I can imagine it would be very hard if God allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I could be wrong, but given how close we are, I don't think that's what God would want, at least for now. But yeah, like I think it would cause both of us a lot of distress if that were to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think unless there's anything else that you guys want to talk about or say.
I have self-promotion. No.
Self-promotion.
I feel bad because the last podcast I was on has also read a book recently, and I think I made a book review. But I have also read a book and made a book review. Although this one maybe relates to a future topic. Is about work. It's called Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. And there's a lot of things there with Christianity and purpose for work, and what does it look like for a Christian to work in a non-Christian world. Maybe that's a topic we discuss in the future. But time. If you want a little bit of a preview, there should be a book review somewhere around.
Yes, if we want I'll send one to you. If we want to meet that 10% quota that we're talking about, just bring that back.
Yeah, you have a YouTube video of it.
Yeah, it should be out by the time the podcast goes.
Link right here.
It's out by tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
It's all edited. It just hasn't been uploaded.
Yeah. Okay. Well, send me the link and I'll put it in the description. Cool. Is there anything else you want to shout out?
Doing any? Mark has a new Instagram. You should add him on Instagram.
Oh, why? Oh. I was actually thinking about that the other day. I was about posting because I'm one of those Instagram users that follows but doesn't post anything. But I was thinking, I might start sharing a few things. And now he's promoted me, and I'm like, I'm gonna have a lot of people sliding in my DMs now.
No. You move like that, huh?
Good.
No. Follow Marcus on Instagram.
Oh god. Follow Jonah on the pod. Don't follow me.
That's right. Do that actually.
Are you doing that already?
Well, thank you guys
Yeah,
for coming on. Thank you all for watching and listening. Yeah, I think we're good.
And
We're
do
good.
that
All
customary photo and then we're right.
Oh, we do it. We do it after the episode now.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you and peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.